And he knows you don't be worried about how the color is on that monitor. It's an old monitor.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for joining Community Planning Conversations today. I'm talking with Katrin Klingenberg. She is the founder and executive director of Eco Labs, here located actually here in Urbana, Illinois. And the focus of our conversation today has to do with passive houses, the design thereof, and how this concept is moving not quick enough, according to Katrin, but it is beginning to move across the United States and mainly coming from Europe. Thank you so much for coming today. Delighted to have you. In fact, Katrin has been on a community planning conversation probably about a year ago, so it's time for us to again talk about passive houses, and she has come with wonderful examples of building materials. But before we get to the show and tell part, I do want to ask Katrin if she would describe and define for our viewers exactly what is a passive house as compared to what some people might say, and she just corrected me actually, saying passive solar houses.
Mm-hmm.
There's clear distinctions.
Mm-hmm. Well, the passive solar home really is the ancestor of the passive house. What the Europeans have done is they took all these very good principles that have already been used a lot in the 70s and the 80s, and they optimized those principles and they used them to optimize the envelope. So these principles are, in short, super insulation, airtightness, super insulation, airtightness, very good windows. They're using a ventilation machine with heat recovery so that you don't lose all your heat that you already have generated out of the window, because you need ventilation. And that's pretty much it. And of course, a thermal storage mass, which most of us know from the old days of passive solar, that still plays a role and is still very helpful, but it does not have to be. So the result of the passive house concept as formulated in Europe really leaves the designer a wide variety of freedom. It doesn't have to be the house that has all glass on the south facade. It doesn't have to be the house that is completely closed up on the north. And I think that's a terrific development.
And just so our viewers are very clear, that means there are no solar panels involved in this kind of design.
That's right. It's primarily passive, and that's the beauty of it. That's what I think, because the energy that we can save, that's really the smartest energy that we have available to us right now. So the passive house concept stipulates that you insulate to a level that the home that you're building uses only 10% of the energy for heating and cooling if you compare it to an existing home. And that is a huge savings, and we can do this just merely with passive measures that we're taking.
Just to keep our viewers intrigued, you have a passive house yourself that you've designed and built, and briefly tell our viewers what your energy costs are.
Well, my average utility bill over the past years was $25, and that is heating,
That's per
cooling.
month.
Yes.
I want it clear so everybody understands.
That includes the fridge and the TV and the computer and all that stuff. It went up a little bit after the rate increase. I have not heard the latest and greatest if that is still in effect or not, but that's how it was last year, $25.
$25 a month. So that gives you some idea of this design principles and how they play themselves out related to energy. Before we talk a bit more about these, to give our viewers a bit of an idea of just how exciting the designs for these houses are and can be. Katrin, at my request, brought this very nice book which shows many houses that have been built, they're all in Europe. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. And the title, actually, the CFIUS, stands for Cost-Effective Passive Houses in the European Union, something like that.
Okay,
So-
all right. So that, and we've marked a few that we want to show you just to begin to introduce the conversation here. This is a very lovely design.
It's in Austria, I believe.
In Austria, Katrin has just said. A whole glass wall. We'll show you a second picture that shows that glass wall with wood on the other side of the facade. And here is the picture of the solid glass side. And the other diagrams you can see here are more technical diagrams that tell a bit about how the construction is done on these houses, and we'll get into that as we have our conversation. Here's another very handsome house. Or is it more of a complex of houses?
I think that's an apartment building.
An apartment building. Well, this is an excellent example. We didn't pick
it's
that on
perfect.
purpose. We picked it because it's such a handsome piece, but it does show that it doesn't have to be applied only to a single.
Oh, it's much
Family.
better. It's much better if you build townhouses or like this one right there, the colored
okay.
one.
There's another.
Those
very
are all
attractive one.
multi-family apartment buildings, condominiums. And the walls get much thicker because one of the design principles is the surface to volume ratio. So if you have a larger volume, then all of a sudden your wall, like if we build a townhouse here in Champaign, Urbana, like 3 townhouses, our walls would be, instead of 14 inches, they would be only 9.5 inches thick.
Oh, okay.
And it makes
Is
a
there-
huge difference.
And here is the last one that we marked to show you. I'm trying to get it straightened out. There we go. Another, well, the shiny paper is causing a glare there. I think we have it.
I think that's some metal cladding that they.
It's
using.
another very intriguing design, again showing that principles of good design marry very nicely with passive houses. Now, you just mentioned that the more units, the more efficiently the passive house can, or passive building, can be designed. Is there a point of diminishing return? Could we do it for a 15-story building?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what they have started in Europe. That's where the development is at right now. They are starting to build large-scale commercial buildings, and it's very efficient at that level.
And you and I have talked about in previous conversations that the use of energy in a house is a large percentage of energy, that the whole total energy used by an individual. And as I recall, your argument is this is one place that by redesigning and using these principles of passive house, that you can reduce that energy consumption. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
What exactly do you have in mind? Like more about the envelope, the kinds of materials that
Well,
we're using,
what I
or-
remember you saying that is if we were going to work on ways of reducing energy consumption and
Okay.
have a broader application of it, thinking about how to redesign houses and buildings is a very good focus for saving
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah. Well, I think it can easily be done if we had just guidelines in place that would ask people to design to the principles of the passive house concept, because then we can just upfront save 90% of all energy. Like right now, there's a lot of research being done towards zero energy homes. The Department of Energy is very interested in that because they know the climate change. That's our only chance. We got to cut down the 40% greenhouse gas emissions that the building sector is contributing. So they are very interested in solutions that work and that are financially viable. The problem right now, as I see it, is that a lot of firms and companies are trying to go the active route. And passive, not passive, but photovoltaic cells right now still are very, very expensive. So what the passive house concept does is, through insulation and airtightness and heat recovery, reduces the overall energy consumption, not just heating and cooling, to 70%. And at that point, we have a realistic chance to make enough renewable energy that we can meet our remaining energy demand. And I think at that point, PV cells become a viable solution. But for a single family home, to make it a zero net energy home, nobody can afford that. And the payback is not there either. They are just very, very expensive right now.
So that wouldn't work as well for people. And to remind our viewers, in our previous conversation, we did talk about the second house that has been built, actually, again, in Urbana, and it's on Fair Lawn, very near Martin Luther King School.
Fairview.
What?
The Fairview Avenue. It's on Fairview Avenue.
Fairview. Did I say
Yeah.
Fair Lawn again?
Yeah.
Fairview Avenue,
Yeah.
near Martin Luther
Yeah.
King School. So there are now 2 in the community. And what are the plans for more?
For the second one. Well, maybe first I can say something very exciting about the result. The first results are in on the first Fairview house.
Yes.
Ibacos is one of the leading partners of the Building America program. I guess hired by the Department of Energy to conduct research towards zero energy homes. And they became our partner last year, and they said, yes, this is a great project. We would love to monitor your house. And they installed sensors inside of the wall.
And this is in your house or in the one on?
That's in the one on Fairview right now.
Okay.
So we just got the first results on the energy consumption, and the predictions are met. The overall energy consumption has been reduced by 55%. We could have made 70% if we had used a small heat pump, ground loop heat pump, or even hot water production through gas. Right now everything is electric. So that is kind of punishing us. But if we go away from those technologies that use electric energy primarily, then we can get down to 70% energy savings. And that's what we're going to try to do for the next one. The only problem there is the technology is more expensive upfront, but that just means we have to raise more funding, and then we will meet our goal. And we have met it on that Fairview house.
And so by definition, it has to be a saving of exactly what percentage?
Well, concerning heating and cooling, it's 90%.
Mm-hmm.
And then that figured into the overall energy balance of a home, that should ideally reach 70% savings. But if you go all electrical with what you still have to provide your heating, water heating, cooking, then that is very difficult to reach. But if you replace those things, you start to cook with gas, you start to provide your hot water with solar thermal or gas. At that point, it's absolutely feasible to reach the 70%
The
energy
70%. And the buildings that we showed the viewing audience, are they meeting that 70%?
Yes. There's a software modeling program that those architects use when they design these homes. This software is very easy to use. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet interface that shows you only what you really need to know. So for architects, very easy to handle. You just enter U values, R values for building materials of your wall construction, and then in the summary page it tells you yes, it's a passive house or not, which is defined by 15 kilowatt hours per square meter and year. It's an equivalent to 4,750 BTUs. So it's really a very, very, very small heat requirement that is still left. In my house, it's the equivalent of a hairdryer. I mean, we keep joking about it, right?
I know,
If
we do joke about your...
I put like I put 10 tea lights on a plate, and I see the temperature rise. So, yeah.
So they're using more gas than electricity in these homes in Europe, and that's how they're more easily able to meet that?
Well, in Europe, they use more solar thermal. We could not afford that in a low-income program. That's a much higher upfront investment, which we couldn't come up with. So really, we should have gone with a nice solar thermal system and then supplementary gas, or just the remaining hot water still needs to get heated with either gas or electricity.
Our viewers may not know that the house that the second house was a low-income house.
Development, yes. So Ecolab primarily is a low-income community housing developer. And we built these homes like one at a time. We're trying to show that with 10% additional upfront cost for a passive house, that can be doable for a community housing development organization, especially if, like it is the case in Urbana, when the city of Urbana and the city council is very supportive of it, and they are themselves looking for implementation strategies for sustainability and energy efficient construction.
And in the calculations that you have done, that additional 10% upfront cost, which you just talked about, what is the projected timeline of recapturing that in energy saved, roughly?
Right. Well, we did the calculation for one of the projects that we were designing for a townhouse project. So let's say we have a 3-unit townhouse project that is built to passive house standard. We compared that construction cost to an Energy Star construction technique. So the same 3 townhouses in Energy Star, same 3 townhouses passive house. The payback, interestingly enough, in passive house construction was sooner than the Energy Star, and it was well, that's the payback of the upfront investment. It was paid back after 7.2 years. The Energy Star was paid back after like 8.1. And then after those years in the passive house, your utility bills will be only 70%. In the Energy Star homes usually, if you're lucky, it saves up to 30% of heating and cooling. So that really does not make a big dent in the overall utility bill.
Right, in energy use.
So after
in the long run.
After those 7 years in a passive house, you really make money because your utility bill is only 30% of what your neighbor pays.
And roughly, what is the increase of upfront cost for an Energy Star home, so people can compare that? It's 10% you said for the passive house. Roughly, what is it for Energy Star?
I can't tell you that because we didn't do that. Or, I mean, Dave probably has the numbers, but I do not have the numbers in my head right now. I just have the payback. So.
Well, the payback is very, definitely very impressive. Well, I'm going to intertwine with some of our conversations of very impressive passive house conferences that have occurred here in the United States. A very recent energy conference that happened just, I think it's October or November of 2006, and then an upcoming passive house conference that will be in Austria. And there's an immense amount of information about passive houses on the internet, and that's where I pulled a lot of this information. And I'm going to intertwine some of those conversations with these very intriguing building materials that Katrin has very helpfully brought with her today. Why don't you just start telling the story of how one goes about building
a passive house?
Building a passive house. I know how this is done, so I recognize many of the pieces here on the table.
Well, you start ideally right from the beginning. If you have a larger design team, everybody should be kind of briefed on the passive house design principles. Of course, number one important thing is siting the building correctly and maximizing passive solar access if you have the opportunity. But again,
and that means what? More exposure to which way?
If you have, like, for example, a long, skinny building, then you might want to, if you have the choice, turn it towards the south so that you're free to place windows to capture the sunlight as much as you like or can. Sometimes you don't have the choice if you're in the city. Sometimes you don't even have any solar access. But that is also possible because of the other elements that go into a passive house, like super insulation and airtightness and very good windows. So really it's kind of like making up, if you need a north window on the north side, a large one, because your client is an artist and wants indirect light in his studio or her studio, then you can compensate for that loss somewhere else through some additional insulation. It's really just the overall balance how you design these elements. So one very important thing, of course, is something that's the insulation material. I brought a couple of these examples right here.
Okay.
I think it is.
Yeah, I open it?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
All right.
I think it's an absolute imperative, like using SIP panels, for example, structurally insulated panels, which have made their way into the marketplace very successfully. I like them by design because how the panels are joined, that already builds in the airtightness. Like somebody who's not familiar with the requirement of airtightness can achieve a very airtight house.
And you're talking about these?
I'm talking about this one.
This panel right here.
Can achieve a very airtight house without really knowing about the importance of airtightness at all.
Why don't you tell folks what this is?
This is a structurally insulated panel, which is EPS in the middle, expanded polystyrene, which is the least bad of the foams. I'm saying that right now from the green materials point of view.
And what about the outgassing situation?
Still not as bad as, for example, like the extruded polystyrene right here, like blue board and pink board and green board, whatever they come in, I would not use on the inside of a building because that stuff does outgas.
And this one that I'm holding now is called Tough 2.
Well, this is actually relating to the coating. That was an example for how you could put a finish, like a stucco-like finish on the outside of, like we've seen in insulated concrete forms. They have been built also here in town. The Beringer Commons development is an example for that technique.
And how long does something like this, is it projected that it outgasses?
Well, I think they say about over a period of 7 years. It's also interesting. A lot of people go with the extruded polystyrene because it has a higher R value. So that's very conducive if you're trying to minimize your wall thickness. The problem is that it actually over time loses R value because it off-gasses. On top of it, it's still manufacturers are still using ozone-depleting agents for these materials. Only the foam polyisocyanurate was required to discontinue the use of ozone-depleting gases.
And we've talked many times with various people who've been on this program about outgassing, but why don't you remind people again exactly what outgassing is and why we're concerned about this happening?
Well, many materials these days have toxins in them, in glues, in gases that have been used to foam up foam. Formaldehyde, for example, is a problem in OSB.
And is this OSB?
This is OSB.
Okay.
But there are manufacturers out there that manufacture OSB without formaldehyde, which is still, I think, fairly difficult to get your hands on. But there are also manufacturers like Weyerhaeuser. They commit themselves to adhere to guidelines from Europe, which are very, very stringent. So whatever they're using is absolutely and totally minimized, and it has been tested in many tests how it affects the health of the inhabitant of a home. My problem with the SIP panel is we are trying to combat global warming. We're trying to get away from fossil fuel energy that we're burning in our homes. So then replacing our homes with a fossil fuel product, EPS, expanded polystyrene, is being made out of oil. At that point, we're kind of defying the purpose. I think it's a very fine technique for right now because it is available, it is economically viable, and really the most important thing right now is we got to bring our energy consumption down. This planet is not going to make it if we do not take drastic action to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So fine for now, but for the future, let's research insulation materials that are more
like
naturally based. If you start talking about the cradle-to-cradle principle.
Wait, let's explain cradle to cradle.
Yes, I was just going to do
okay.
that. That's another green sustainable rating system. Michael Braungart and William McDonough have established that the idea is that a material should be designed in one of two ways. Either it should be safely thrown onto the compost, and then you can grow your next generation of tomatoes on it, which means it's a natural product like this one. This is
Or bamboo, which could be
or
flooring.
bamboo. This is industrial hemp, which also includes, for example, like glue. Like in bamboo flooring, you have a lot of glues. So
Yes.
ideally, there should be a snail glue used, which is in existence. Biomimicry, we see that in nature. There are very fine natural products that do exactly what we need them to do, but we need to research them and start using them. So that would be one design principle: throw it onto compost, grow tomatoes. Or you make something so that it can be at 100% recycled, like metal, for example. So you have no waste at all. Or particular kinds of plastic, you can recycle them at 100%. You do not lose anything, which is a very high standard, and I have not found myself to be able to anywhere close to be able to adhere to that. So, but I think it's very worthwhile. We got to go that direction if we really want to create a sustainable building industry. So in that sense, this has the same R value like our foams that we are so used to using, like polystyrene, for example. This one is a fabulous material right here.
Here, let me hold this up so folks can get
and this is
better look at
industrial
this.
hemp. I mean, it's natural. I hope we can show this.
And hemp is used to make clothing.
Exactly.
It's a very good
Yeah.
product, and it's got potentially a great economic base to it.
Exactly. Yes. Very low embodied energy. Very important for the overall energy balance that goes into a building. Again, there the SIP panels are not looking so good because it takes a lot of energy to make.
And it
foam.
doesn't take as much energy to grow this.
Exactly.
Right.
So this one is a fabulous product because it is part hemp and part sheep's wool.
Can I now?
Yes.
So I can show people. All right.
So there's a lot of fear when you insulate your buildings. People are concerned with moisture, that moisture gets into the wall and that then your insulation material will be damaged or it doesn't insulate anymore. This material has the capacity to hold vapor of up to 30% of its own weight, and it does not lose any of its insulation value.
That's our value.
Exactly. So technically, you really can open your wall completely diffusion open, because the wall will, if it breathes to the inside as much to the outside, then it can discharge the moisture.
And this is a German product?
Yeah.
Am I
And
determining
all-
that from what I see on the package?
Yeah, a lot
here?
of these things have been developed actually during this whole Passive House movement phase. And every time I go over to the International Passive House Conference, it's just so exciting to see what else has been newly developed. And this is again a natural insulation material just made out of wood fiber. One of the most exciting products that the bio house, the passive house that has been built up in Bemidji, has been using is a vacuum panel. And that vacuum panel looks like the coffee packages that you buy, you know, these little square things, silver. And instead of coffee, there's silica in it. And the R value that they can achieve with these vacuum panels is 30 R per inch, which is crazy.
That is.
Like, for example, this one is 5. So this panel as a vacuum panel would be 30 R. Can you imagine what that would mean for retrofitting of buildings?
Well,
That
it means a lot. It means a lot of things.
It's just amazing.
It means a lot of extra space interiorly because you haven't taken up so much space
Right.
with walls. It opens up all aspects. You've sort of folded in a couple of things that will take us back to talking a bit about what's happening here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned what's happening up at Bemidji, Minnesota. Why don't you talk about that first Passive House conference that was
that
held
was,
up there?
That was incredibly exciting. During the last Passive House conference, I met a design team, architecture team, that was hired they were hired by the Concordia language villages up there, and they were wanting to build
Connected with Concordia College.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and they were building a new building for their German village. and they wanted a modern building, state of the art. So they went to Germany and they tried to find out what the latest technologies were in terms of sustainability and energy efficiency, and they found the passive house concept. So they went ahead very quickly, unbelievable, and built this. It's basically a school building. It's a building with maybe 10 bedrooms, and it's designed for seminars and conferences, and that's where we had the first passive house conference in North America, so to speak. And it was a very small group, all very professional people, a lot of them who have been doing passive solar and zero energy homes for 30 years, and they were really excited to see it come back so strongly in Europe, and it was a fabulous, fabulous weekend. We had really great presentations.
For those who might be interested in learning a bit more about this, let me give you the website to find the information and see pictures of the building, and it's at www.waldebiohaus.com. And this will take you to the website, and you can look at the design of this particular building, which is rather exciting to see.
It's a beautiful building.
Give our viewers some sense of how many passive buildings have now been built and completed in the United States.
Oh, that's really exciting for me, because this is exciting when you take the concept and you take it to a different climate zone. That was already exciting to build mine here in Illinois and see what happens.
Right.
So we started.
But we do want to remind people that this is up in Minnesota, which is much colder.
They're in like a much more severe climate zone,
Yes.
and they made it, and it's really significant. So there are a couple other people who got inspired, and they started soliciting clients who would like to build passive houses, and we're consulting on 2 passive houses in the Duluth area right now. One is actually ready to break ground this spring. The planning has gotten that far.
This is a personal home.
It's a personal home. There's one in the planning stage in New Mexico, Taos, right now, which is going to be a straw bale home.
Well, that would be very interesting to use them as test sites, the difference of climate, the difference of materials that can be used. You can use rammed earth in New Mexico. Yes. You can't use rammed earth up in Minnesota.
As long as you meet the thermal requirements, you're fine. You can use whatever you can come up with. So that project is going up. There's another one that was attempting to get to passive house land but didn't get there. There's another one up in Ottawa, and there's one under construction right now in Berkeley, California, and that's the project I'm going to have my paper on, the presentation at the International Passive House Conference in Austria. And I just had a couple workshops in the Cape Cod area on Martha's Vineyard also. And I came back with a commission to do energy consulting to passive house standard on Martha's Vineyard, which is a 5,000 square foot home. I'm very excited about that, not because it is that big, but because a lot of people in the United States build big homes, and we can show that we can build that to passive house standard and save 90% of the energy that is used to heat and cool it.
Everybody's taken Al Gore to task for the size of his.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that too.
His home. But if it's a passive house, then yes, he can make the argument that he's not using so much energy. Part of my research on the internet led me to some information about what is happening in Minnesota. There seems to be a climate up there, an architectural climate, shall we say, of wanting to capture some of these principles. What is the difference up there than here in Illinois? Let's say that there's more of a willingness to think about these issues and maybe even put some of these principles to practice.
Well, I think they already in the 70s and 80s had a very strong movement, like earth-sheltered homes, super insulated buildings. Gary Nelson is in Minnesota, the inventor of the blower door test, I think. So number one, there's a great history of people who have always been trying to take advantage of these principles because they are in a colder climate and the energy prices to heat their homes are much more significant. So I think they are seeing an incredible opportunity in that construction technique to alleviate people of ever-rising energy prices. That's one thing, and I'm sure that there are also other motives, like really understanding we need to take action in regards to climate change.
And I also, because you had mentioned it, there was an energy conference in October, NESCA. Why don't you tell folks what that stands for and talk about some of the interesting sessions and what people were bringing to the table and new information and new experiences, because I'm jumping to the conclusion this must be a very changing technology and everybody is playing with it in various ways, and so the dynamics of sharing discoveries must be exploding.
Fabulous group out there in Boston. I love them. This is I was invited there last year for the first time to speak, and they had a whole day of a Passive House session. They had invited people from the Passive House Institute in Germany. So we had an entire day of discussing it and how it compared to the American zero energy home movement and the pluses and minuses, and how it is somehow similar but yet different. That was really great last year, and we started to form some friendships. And so I went there again this year. It's called the Building Energy 07, and then next year it's going to be Building Energy 08. It's the Northeastern Energy Conference, and there are great people there. And just to mention a few, like Alex Wilson, the founder of the Building Green, Terry Brennan from Cam Roden Associates, I believe, Stephen Winter Associates. Like, these are all like firms that have been for a long time working on energy efficiency. Also, Ibacos, our partner from Pittsburgh, who's doing the monitoring on the Fairview House, was presenting, and they had a session called The Best of the Crop of 2006, and they presented the Fairview House. They presented the measuring results, the first measurements that they had on the Fairview project in Urbana, Illinois. It was received very well, and more people are catching on to the Passive House concept.
That probably is an information that folks here really understand what a huge success that house has been. Yes.
Very important. I just remembered the plenary, the opening speaker was Ed Misria. I'm sure that a lot of folks have already heard of him. I mean, he has been a long time sustainable green architect, huge body of work from New Mexico, and he recently launched the 2030 challenge. People who are interested in it, the website is 2030 architecture2030.org, I believe. And
so it's the whole word architecture 2030.org.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And that basically sets defines a schedule to reduce our carbon emissions ASAP. He's calling for action now. So interestingly enough, his final stage that he wants to reach for every new building in 2030 is the Passive House standard. So we can do it today. That's my message, I think. And it's great that people like Ed Misria, the Rocky Mountain Institute, has endorsed it. Lots of schools have endorsed that
Rocky
action.
Mountain Institute is in Boulder.
Yep. So a lot of big companies are jumping on the bandwagon. They say, yes, that's what we need to do. And I think with the Passive House concept, we have the tools to do it. It's hope. He also showed pictures of rising sea levels and what that would do if we kept going the way we're going right now. In 2050, a third of Florida, well, people who have seen The Inconvenient Truth, like the coastal areas will all be underwater. We will have to deal with an incredible migration, probably towards Chicago. So I don't even want to think that, because at that point, probably the ecosystem is so, anyway. So anyway, I think that with Passive House construction, to that level of energy savings, I think we have a chance to make it.
Okay. You have a few more pieces that you brought. I want to get to those, so I'm sure that we do before we talk about this upcoming conference in Austria. What?
Yeah,
Besides
these
looking
things-
like puzzle pieces for children.
Well, like currently, if you try to buy a window in the United States, a wood window, lots of people like wood windows a lot, you cannot get them insulated. And if you build a passive house, the frame of a window is very important. It's a relatively large area compared to the glass. So what they went ahead and did in Germany was they made these composite profiles and they insulated them. So this acts as a thermal bridge in a wooden window frame. So this would be something like
Here,
this.
let's move this forward so people can.
It's heavy. That's very heavy.
Well, we'll slide it then forward.
All right. So
There. Now,
this is-
now she can show you a little bit better.
So this is where the window would sit right here. So this is breaking between the inside and the outside. It insulates, right? So you don't have a thermal bridge. Wood is a good insulator, but not anywhere close to what like cellulose or foam can do. So this is nice. This would be just a regular vinyl window. I would not like to use vinyl. I like to use fiberglass because of like the toxins, vinyl dioxins, I guess, are involved in the production, the vinyl chloride.
Yes, and then again, the outgassing situation,
The
which,
outgassing.
and those are very cancerous.
Right, and-
Association with cancer causing.
In production and in use, so
And in
it's,
use,
it's
yes.
a very questionable product. Anyway, those profiles also allow you to insulate. Right here again with extruded polystyrene.
Now, is this the kind of
Am
window
I being
you
hot?
you have in your house?
Handled window. This is actually a German window. So as you can see, those frames are much thicker than their market common over here. And the Germans right now, since I've been going to the conference, they're kind of jealous. They are trying to figure out how to take the profiles that we have here, like the Canadian windows. They think are great because they have very skinny frames, so that allows you more solar gain.
I see what you're saying.
The skinnier the frame, the more glass. And the glass actually is much better insulated than the frame. So with a glass that is suitable for a passive house here in this region, this would be a pane of glass that the R value is about 9. So this R value is better than this. And that's pretty good. So how do we get there? We have triple pane windows. We have non-conductive spacers, very important. Like you have to avoid all thermal bridges. Thermal bridge means that
Yes,
heat
right.
can go directly from the inside to the outside. Like if you have a piece of steel that goes from the inside to the outside, steel conducts heat very well. So you can't have that because you're directly losing your heat to the outside. Yeah, and then these panes of glass, they have low E coatings on them, which means it's a reflective coating that helps with keeping either increasing the solar gain or decreasing it, keeping the heat in or out. Like you can get different variations of these coatings. You have actually 6 surfaces to choose from where you can put these coatings, and then that will result in different quality windows. So you will need a different window on the west side, for example, than on the south. On the west side, you will not be able to shade your window very effectively because the sun is already so low. So you're in danger of picking up a lot of overheating. So that window might want to have a different kind of coating to keep the energy actually out. So yeah, these windows are great. For example, in California, the climate is so different in California that they are fine with double pane windows and uninsulated wooden frames. So that's the fun part when you take this concept and you transport it into different climate zones.
Absolutely. And so, where do you find this when you are building here in the United States?
There are 3 Canadian manufacturers. They produce fiberglass windows and with insulated frames, very high U value glass.
Let me turn it this way. So,
I don't know if that's acceptable to advertise those names? I mean, I can mention.
Well, I wanted to ask that because that sort of folds back to what you mentioned earlier, and when I chatted with Julie Vogel, who built the Straw Bale house, mentioning that some principles that are very important and could be folded into design. It's a little bit of the Frank Lloyd Wright principle. You know what you'd like to accomplish, but there's a bit of a lag as to availability, and availability might be in Germany but not here in the United States yet, or it's made it to Canada, as you just mentioned about the windows, but it isn't in the lumber store here in Champaign-Urbana.
Well, see, that's kind of like the task that we wanted to achieve, I guess. The Biohaus in Minnesota, what they did, they took a very different approach. They pretty much imported the whole building from Germany. They worked with the Department
all the materials and
yes,
things.
they worked with the Department of Commerce, the German chamber in Washington. They got a lot of money. They did not have any limit of spending. So, and that's how that building looks. It looks like as if a building has been just dug up from Europe, Austria, Switzerland, wherever, and just plopped down in Bemidji. Still a great example, and I'm so happy to have it here. But we have been trying to really only use materials that we can get in the United States, use construction techniques that people are familiar with, like those TJIs that we have been using to create like a thick double stud wall, basically, but still use it like just one stud and not have to like deal with two studs and like
or
line
offset
them up and stuff. That stuff is readily available. So and the construction, balloon framing, platform framing is all the same. There are a couple of tricky details, not really tricky, just things that you need to pay attention to achieve the airtightness, but other than that, it's all standard. So, and I think that's why we are really this close to really economically have it successful for the next one. I really think that we are going to be able to show that the cost will be the cost initial investment will be between 5 to 10%. We have developed new details which will allow us to prefab the panels. So we are looking for somebody who might want to donate like a warehouse with like some kind of a crane capability so that we can prefab these panels. And in that case, we would be able to just put them all in a truck, drive them out to the site, put them up in a day, and then we're inside and starting to finish the home. And at that point, I think this concept is unbeatable. And I'm really looking forward to that.
That's I think that's wonderful to sort of mechanize, to shave the cost so that it really can apply across the board to low income housing, and also kind of break that barrier that I'm sure you sometimes meet with developers if it can't be almost automated in the construction format.
And it needs to be cost effective. If the numbers do not work out, if it is too expensive, nobody's going to do it. So we gotta hit our target like between 5 and 10%, which is going to be paid off after 6 or 7 years, and at that point it's going to be a no-brainer for the for the construction industry.
Now you have 2 more pieces of material that we haven't covered. Let's be sure.
And this one. Well, this is pretty much just the equivalent to, it says roof insulation here, but this is the equivalent to the good old fiberboard that people used to use for their exterior sheathing. With a bituminous coating on the outside. I like it better without the bituminous coating. I mentioned that earlier, the passive house wall should be designed diffusion open, which means that if there's vapor getting into the wall from the inside, because we shower and cook and stuff, we have a vapor barrier on the inside. Nothing is really 100% vapor tight, so if something gets in, it should be able to get out on the other side, because otherwise if it condenses there, then you have problems.
Called paint peeling.
So really the rule is that the exterior sheathing, it should be vapor, the vapor permeance, which is the ability to let vapor through, should be at least 5 times of what you have on the inside. Better even if it is 30 times. So without bituminous coating, it would be 30 times. So this is what we're using as sheathing on the outside. It also gives us additional insulation because it's fiberboard and not just plywood.
Okay, it is fiberboard. That's what I
Yes.
wondered what it was, what the materials
So
are.
it has two advantages. It's diffusion open and it's insulative. It breaks, like if I have this thing here.
Yes.
It's not much, but it does its trick. It's a little bit of breaking the thermal bridge because even though there's not much here, but you still see you have like a direct conduction from
Right,
inside to
you
the
do.
outside. So you want to break this at
So that
least
barrier
a
is
little
it.
bit. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And the last material?
Yeah, this is what I found last year, and I was really excited. And then they took us on a tour at the Passive House conference, and they took us into a huge sports hall, like with four of these segments where people play basketball. And they said, well, we didn't use any foam under this hall. And I'm like, what did you use? And they're like, well, this is foamed glass. And foamed glass
Wow.
has, again, the equivalent insulation value to the EPS, the expanded polystyrene.
Okay.
So if we use that as gravel for underneath of our buildings, we're taking care of the insulation without fossil fuel products and pretty much just, yeah, that stuff crumbles, you can put on the compost, I guess. So I don't know.
That's amazing to give our viewers some sense. If you know lava rock, it has some of that look to it.
Yeah, or rock wool, right? The insulation,
Right.
that is kind of like a byproduct, the slag from,
Exactly.
that's the same idea.
Well, the last thing that we haven't touched on is this upcoming Passive House conference in Austria. Briefly tell our viewers about that and why such a conference right there where there are so many examples and places becomes so exciting for somebody who's trying to really encourage people to be thinking about that here in the United States.
Well, this place where it is held this year in Bregenz is fabulous because those people down there, the architects, really embraced the passive house concept. The Germans tend to be more like on the kind of like dry engineering side, and their architecture is okay, but the Austrians really embraced the passive house concept, and they said, we want to show that this is not in contradiction to architecture at all. In fact, it opens like other opportunities that we didn't see or have before. So there are a lot of really amazing examples, churches, kindergartens, schools, right in that area that have a very, very high architectural value, I think. So that's also the topic of that conference. It's architecture and passive house technology, so that it's not a contradiction. Also, that interestingly enough, that conference was sold out 2 months before. I think you only get in now by getting put on a waiting list. So there's a giant international interest as well. There are people from all over the world, from all over Europe, by now Spain to Norway. There are people from Korea. There are people from New Zealand who bought like the software from us. It's spreading all over the globe, and I think the demand shows it. So it's a fabulous event.
We have neglected to let our viewers know how to contact you. First, spell the name of Ecolab so people make certain they get the dash in the right spot in case they would like to search for you on the internet.
Yeah, well, my name usually does the trick too, but it's E-CO space L-A-B, and the website, again, confusing, is E-CO no space L-A-B, so one word, .org.
And so with that URL, you'll be able to find their website, learn a bit more about the projects that Katrin Klingenberg and her group at Ecolab have been involved in here in Urbana, Illinois, and are going to be involved in various spots around the United States that she mentioned during our conversation. Thank you again for watching Community Planning Conversations, and remember, planning matters.